talking about engaging students in research in the classroom. And I've invited Dylan Salterman from psychology and Sarah Malcolm from animal science to come talk about experiences and things they've done in their own classroom. Dylan, when I was talking to him before this, posed me the question, in fact, what is research? If we want to actually engage students in authentic research, what actually are we talking about? I found a quote by Davis and Shade, and they talked about how this research kind of differs from apprenticeship work, which is what they consider most undergraduate coursework to be. They said we typically are not making knowledge, but sort of reporting the known. And so there's different ideas within the literature on what sort of research is creating new knowledge means for undergraduates. And for us, creating new knowledge there's a really high bar for that, usually within your field. And do you want to set the same high bar for undergraduates in your class? What does new mean to them? Does it mean it's new for them, new for the class, new not in their textbook, or does it mean new that they're actually adding and contributing something to their field?
One of the things I learned is they don't actually know how to do it. And I was sure in this digital age that of course they would know how to do research, that they had been taught in high school, and that they all had access to the internet, and therefore that they could understand what research was because they learned that in their science classes, and that they could procure new research through the internet. And instead, I hear things like, I did some research on the internet. Usually my heart stops a couple beats while I wait for the second half of that sentence, and then they proceed to tell me about articles that are not particularly well done, peer vetted, anything like that. Or they do find a research article and they don't understand what it is because they don't actually know what the research process is. They can tell me the steps of the scientific method, which would be the applicable way to do research in my discipline, but they don't understand what it means, and so they can't evaluate existing research. I'm pretty sure they couldn't do actual research. So I really think that this is important for them to do. And probably most important to me, and should be important to all of us, is that it's lifelong learning skills. Whether we're sending them to graduate school or professional school, or if we're just sending them to be citizens of our world where they have to make a lot of choices about things that they may know very little about. Be that whether or not we should have nuclear energy, or whether or not we should be involved in a particular war, or healthcare policy. We need to teach them what research is, how do you evaluate it, and what do you do with it. So that's why I teach research. First, I'll start out with just asking the right question. So if I were an economist, I would have very different questions to ask about how my veterinary clinic ran than I do as a practitioner. And those are different questions that a sociologist would have about the same clinic and the patient population and the client population there. So they need to learn to ask the right questions. They also need to learn to ask those questions with the right terminology. So sometimes that's a barrier to students figuring out what to do. So we talk a lot about doing the research. So the skills here, using a particular field method during class time, would include learning data collection techniques that are appropriate to your discipline with some supervision, learning the lesson that not everything goes as planned, so that perfectly put together lab experiment where you've titrated everything perfectly and they can't blow up the chemistry lab, the experiment won't fail, the interviewees will always give the right answer, is not actually how life goes. So why are we teaching them that?
The other thing is you can focus on pieces of the research process rather than the whole thing. So in Psych 420, we really try to get the whole thing, we try to get the whole process, but in your classes, in some of my lower level classes as well, you might just focus on one element of it and say, this is part of the research, this is what you're going to be doing. And what this does is essentially it alleviates a lot of the burden from us as the instructors as well as the students, because being able to come up with an original research idea in a matter of 2 or 3 weeks is really challenging for anybody, not just an undergraduate. I mean, it's challenging for me. Some of my ideas take months to develop, and it would be the end of the semester before it even gets off the ground. A big piece of what I do in some of my other classes is just focus on the ideas, focus on this scientific creativity and innovation aspect. And this is useful not just for research, but creativity as a whole. No matter what students end up doing when they leave Maryland, their success in life will ultimately depend on their ability to innovate, on their ability to see what is out there, but also be able to see what's not out there and say, that's what I'm going to do. And I always give the example of Mark Zuckerberg, because he saw something that didn't exist and he said, I'm going to create this. And if any student who uses Facebook knows what it is, they understand that someone had to come up with the idea first in order for it to be there.